I know, Steve, through my own experiences, being in the space, being a host, you've been around our portfolio, we've been using Steve to do fire risk assessments on our own properties to make sure that we're meeting the framework and that we're protected and that we're doing things correctly. But I know through being in the business, being in the communities, seeing the conversations that people are having in the training courses and in the communities online, there seems to be a lot of confusion around this. You're in the business, you're educated on this stuff. So when you read the legislation in the handbooks that have been released, for you, it's quite straightforward. If I had a penny for every time I've heard someone say, well, yeah, Alex, I've read it, but it's a bit grey, right? I've heard this word a million times, not only from hosts, operators, trainers, but also from other fire risk assessors that have said, well, yeah, it's a bit grey, it could be this, could be that. Now, the reason why I like you and working with you, and the reason why you're part of our business, such a major part of our business in keeping our portfolio and ourselves safe and our guests safe, is because the first thing you said was, there's no grey here. It's black and white, right? It's clear what you have to do. So why don't we go over some of the key changes, because I know there's a lot of confusion out there. So there's a lot of operators watching this, listening to this. They've got a portfolio. It's a mixture of flats, apartments, houses, 2 floors, 3 floors, detached semis, terrace, whatever. And everybody's thinking, what the hell do I do? So why don't we run over some of the key changes that hosts really have to be aware of and some of the processes that they can follow to protect themselves?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost is it's important to understand what the type of property that you've got is and what specific piece of guidance it falls under. So are you falling under the small property paying guest accommodation guidance, or do you have to conform to the wider sleeping guest accommodation, which has slightly more onerous conditions around it? To try and bottom this out, I have been speaking to fire and rescue services around the country and to
getting it from the horse's mouth.
From the horse's mouth. So, understanding what, from the community and inspection perspective, what are the fire and rescue services expecting to see?
Sorry, Steve, can I just butt in there real quick because it's important. What Steve just said is massively important. Steve is talking to the people who are going to be looking into this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Who are going to be following it up and potentially using it against you if you're not following the framework. So when you're sitting in a classroom, when you're sitting in a course with a mentor, whoever that is, and they're giving you this information, you better make damn sure that they are as educated as you, right? When they're giving you that information, which they're not going to be. That's why you should always seek the advice, I believe, of someone like Steve, who is actually making these phone calls, having these conversations on a daily basis with people who are enforcing this stuff.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I took that approach, because of the rhetoric around it's grey and me saying it isn't grey, it's black and white. The guidance is quite clear in terms of the minimum expectations of fire precautions you need to put in place. But there is room for that to be interpreted. Now, there's a lot of misconception generally that, the fire service is the fire service and therefore the law is the law. The reality is different fire and rescue services will enforce slightly differently, and that's dependent on their own service directives, their own local problem-solving approaches. So there may be a fire and rescue service that has a particular issue with serviced accommodation, may have a particular issue with licensed premises, may have a particular issue with retail, leisure. So that will get a certain focus. So they may, to their own approach, enforce it slightly differently. There may be some local bylaws, there may well be some local council or local government approaches to how fire safety is managed. And you need to sort of understand that a little. So I've been approaching the fire and rescue services around the country to get their opinion on this. And if there's one thing that's come back, the common approach that I'm seeing is a steadfast application to the written word in both the guidance and the supporting British standards. So if the guidance says you need a fire alarm, they will say you need a fire alarm, and if the guidance says it needs to be to a certain British standard, they will inspect you to that British standard. It's very linear, very black and white. So in essence, what the fire service will be looking for when they come to inspect you, is very direct, very straightforward. First and foremost, they'll be looking for a fire risk assessment. You cannot even begin to approach fire safety precautions until you've done your risk assessment, until you understand the nature of your premises and the risks that you have in them. Because every single premises is different. Every single premises, regardless as to when it was built, has its own issues with fire safety. And unless you do your risk assessment, you're not going to be able to be in a foundation to start to put your precautions in place.